Welcome in, everybody. Today, we're going deep on something pretty fascinating, the Trump presidency. But with a twist. We're not focusing on the big headlines everyone remembers.
Right.
It's more about, the impact on the everyday people working in government, the federal workforce.
Yeah, kind of like a behind-the-scenes look. We've got this document, really insightful, that gives you that insider perspective.
Oh, juicy.
And let me tell you, it reveals a real sense of whiplash going on during those years. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
executive orders flying around left and right.
Oh, yeah, those executive orders. I remember thinking, hold up, how many is that now? I felt like a ton, especially right at the start.
It was a lot, and not just the sheer number, but the speed. Agencies were scrambling, trying to figure out policies that were, honestly, sometimes a bit murky.
Unclear.
Yeah, unclear, or even, legally questionable, especially anything related to immigration. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah, the travel ban. Can't forget that. Talk about chaos. Didn't that just throw agencies like Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection into a tailspin?
Oh, absolutely. Picture this. You're a Border Patrol agent just trying to do your job.
Right.
Suddenly, bam, the rules are changing by the hour, protests are popping up everywhere, lawsuits are piling up. Talk about stressful and confusing.
You bet. For everyone involved.
Totally. But here's the thing, the travel ban, its impact went way beyond just those crazy first few weeks. It actually ended up reshaping immigration policy in ways we're still dealing with.
That's a great point. So you've got this flurry of executive orders, and then wham, here come the budget cuts.
Oh, yeah?
I'm trying to imagine, working at the EPA, super committed to protecting the environment, and suddenly your agency's budget is just slashed. Ouch.
It was rough. And it wasn't just about the numbers.
What do you mean?
These cuts, they sent a message loud and clear, like this is what the administration cares about and this isn't.
I see.
Whole programs got axed, staff were cut way back, and you can bet a lot of people felt like, wait, my work, my mission, does it even matter anymore?
That must have been demoralizing, to say the least.
Yeah.
Was this mainly an EPA thing, or was this happening all over?
Oh, no, it was widespread, State Department, education, you name it. And then to add insult to injury, there was that hiring freeze Trump put in place.
Oh, right.
Agencies were already stretched thin, and now they couldn't even fill essential positions.
Double whammy.
Exactly. Led to a lot of overworked employees and, further fueled that feeling of my work doesn't matter.
Recipe for burnout, for sure.
Yeah.
Then, just as everyone's trying to adjust to all this, things get even more, let's say, interesting with this big push for deregulation,
Yep.
especially in areas like, environmental protection and healthcare. It's like 1 minute you're going this way, then bam, complete U-turn.
Totally. Roller coaster is a good analogy. It was constant policy shifts, big ones, so fast it felt like a hurricane. You're enforcing one set of rules, then suddenly it's the opposite.
Wow. I imagine that put the folks responsible for actually implementing these changes in a really tough spot, especially those career civil servants who have dedicated their lives to this work.
It did. Imagine having to enforce rules you personally disagree with.
Oh, yeah.
It created a ton of inner conflict.
Is there any particular example that really sticks out for you during this whole deregulation whirlwind, something that captures that feeling of whiplash for these federal employees?
Let's see. One that comes to mind is the rollback of those regulations on coal-fired power plants. The Obama administration had put some pretty strict rules in place to try to reduce carbon emissions. Then the Trump administration came in and was like, nope, getting rid of those.
I see.
Created a whole lot of uncertainty, both for the energy industry and for the people at the EPA who had to, figure out how to oversee this whole thing.
So we've got executive orders coming in hot and heavy, budgets getting slashed, deregulation causing all kinds of confusion. And then, to top it off, you've got Trump constantly attacking the deep state.
Right. The deep state. That rhetoric, it really had a chilling effect.
I can see why.
Especially in places like the FBI, the State Department. Morale took a hit.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's like you go to work every day wondering if you're suddenly public enemy number one, even though you're just trying to do your job, serve your country.
It was like that for a lot of people. This whole culture of fear and suspicion took root. Like people were afraid to speak up, disagree, anything.
Wow.
And with all the leadership turnover happening at the same time, well, a lot of valuable knowledge and experience just walked out the door.
Yeah, that leadership turnover, it was like a revolving door at the top of so many agencies. How did that constant instability affect the workforce?
Well, put yourself in their shoes. Try doing your job effectively when you have a new boss every few months, each with their own agenda, their own priorities.
Right.
Disruptive is an understatement.
So you've got new political appointees coming in, often clashing with those career civil servants who've been there for years, decades even. I bet that caused some friction.
Oh, it did. That clash, political appointees versus career staff, it's a recurring theme throughout this whole period. And it really did affect how well government agencies could function.
And on top of all that, a lot of Trump's policies faced immediate legal challenges.
Yeah.
Right. What was it like for the federal employees who were basically caught in the middle of all that?
Remember that travel ban we talked about earlier?
Yep.
Well, not only was it chaotic for the agencies trying to make it happen, they were under a microscope. Public scrutiny, legal pressure, the whole nine yards. And this happened with other policies too, especially anything to do with immigration or environmental protection.
Sounds like an impossible situation. You're trying to implement policies, but they're constantly being challenged in court. And then you've got the public outcry, the media scrutiny. No wonder morale took such a hit.
Exactly. And that leads us to one of the most significant, long-lasting impacts of the Trump presidency on the federal workforce: erosion of trust.
That's a good point. Makes you wonder, how do you even start to rebuild trust after something like that?
That's the million-dollar question. And one we'll definitely dig into more as we go. But before we get there, I think it's important to understand just how deep this loss of trust goes. We're not just talking about the relationship between federal workers and the executive branch. It extends to how the public sees the government as a whole.
That's a really interesting thought. Okay, so we've covered a lot, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface. We've seen how constant changes, the budget cuts, that whole deep state rhetoric, the leadership carousel, all of it created this sense of whiplash for the federal workforce. But what about the after effects, the long-term consequences? What happened after things settled down a bit? That's what I'm curious about.
Oh, for sure. That's where things get even more interesting because the impact of the Trump presidency on the federal workforce, it didn't just end after those 4 years. It's still shaping how the government works today.
Well, I'm ready to go deeper. Let's
Right.
see what else we can uncover.
Yeah. So yeah, like we were saying, the effects of the Trump administration on the federal workforce, they didn't just disappear overnight. It's not like flipping a switch. We're still seeing the consequences today.
Makes sense. You can't just erase 4 years of intense change. What are some of the biggest things that are still lingering?
Well, morale, for one. It's still a problem. A lot of federal employees are just, well, they're exhausted, they're disillusioned, and they're not really sure what the future holds.
Yeah, I can imagine. After everything they went through, it's bound to have a lasting impact. Are people leaving government service because of this?
We are seeing more retirements, yeah. And people just leaving government altogether, which is a huge problem because we're losing all that experience, all that expertise. It's hard to replace.
And it makes it even tougher to attract new talent, right?
Mm,
Especially with the crazy political climate we've been in.
absolutely. Imagine you're a young person thinking about a career in public service. Then you see what happened during the Trump years. It makes you wonder, is this really what I want to sign up for?
That's a valid question. It's hard to feel inspired to serve your country when you see how the people who came before you were treated.
Exactly. And it raises this big question. How do we get talented people to want to work in government and stay there, especially after witnessing all that turmoil? It's a tough one.
Seems like rebuilding trust is key, wouldn't you say? Both within the workforce itself and between the government and the American people.
You got it. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's a long process. It takes consistent effort from leaders at every level.
So where do you even start? How do you rebuild trust and make it a more, I don't know, stable and supportive environment for federal employees?
Communication is huge. Clear and consistent communication. People need to know what's expected of them, what the priorities are, how does their work fit into the big picture. They need to feel like their leaders actually have a plan, a vision for the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But what about that tension we talked about before between the political appointees and the career civil servants?
Mm.
How do you fix that?
That's a tough one. But I think you start by recognizing that both groups bring something valuable to the table. Political appointees, they come in with fresh ideas, a mandate from the voters. Career folks, they have the experience, the institutional knowledge. They know how things work. Finding a way for these two groups to work together, that's crucial.
Sounds like open communication and mutual respect are pretty important.
Totally. And hey, maybe we can even learn from all this, from the challenges of the past. Maybe we can build a system that's a little tougher, more resilient, so it doesn't get rocked so hard next time something like this happens.
I like that. It's not about dwelling on the negative, it's about learning from it.
Yeah.
and making things better.
Right. And recognizing how dedicated and resilient the people who make up the federal workforce are. They went through a lot, but they kept showing up, doing their jobs, often under really tough conditions.
That says a lot about their commitment to public service. This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to how crucial the federal workforce is to our democracy. It's easy to forget about them, but they make decisions, implement policies that affect every part of our lives.
So true. I mean, think about it. The air we breathe, the roads we drive on, the safety of our communities, it all comes back to the work of the federal government in some way. And that's why it's so important to have a strong, independent civil service. They're the ones who provide stability, expertise, even when things are crazy in the political world.
Out of everything we've talked about, what stands out to you as the most important lesson we can learn from this whole period?
I think it's the importance of being an informed citizen, really understanding how our government works, who the players are, how we can hold them accountable. Knowledge is power.
Mhm.
The more we know about what goes on behind the scenes, the better we can participate in our democracy.
So it's not just about the federal workforce, it's about all of us,
Right.
right? We all have a responsibility to make our government better, more effective, more accountable.
Exactly. It's about understanding how complex the system is, appreciating the people who work in it, and getting involved to make sure our government actually serves the people.
That's a powerful message. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, the drama, but we have to remember that there are real people behind all of that. People who are working hard to make our country a better place.
And it's good to remember the Trump era, yeah, it was unique, but a lot of these issues, the tension between political appointees and career people, the need for good communication, strong leadership, those are always going to be there, no matter who's in charge.
It's a good reminder that building a strong, resilient government, it's a constant process. It takes all of us paying attention and getting involved.
Yeah, and it's a process we can all be a part of. We
Okay.
can't just sit back and be like, well, someone else will fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is just remembering that there are people, real people, working hard behind the scenes to keep the government running, even when it feels like everything's falling apart. That's something I've really come to appreciate through this whole deep dive. The people in the federal government, they're dedicated, they're resilient.
It's a story you don't always hear.
So to everyone listening out there, we hope this exploration has given you some new perspectives on, how complex the federal workforce is and how important it is to our democracy. Maybe you're even inspired to learn more about specific agencies or even think about a career in public service yourself.
Yeah. Or even just small actions can make a difference. Maybe you'll reach out to your elected officials or stay more informed about different policies. Or even just having thoughtful conversations with friends and family about what role government should play in our society.
Those are great ideas. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by these big challenges, but like you said, even small actions can have a ripple effect.
We're all in this together, right?
Okay.
And the more we know, the more we're engaged, the stronger our democracy becomes.
Well said.
Mm.
This deep dive has been eye-opening for sure. I got a lot to think about.
Me too. It's a topic that doesn't always get the attention it deserves, but it affects all of us in a big way.
To our listener, thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep learning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.